Welcome to Southwest Desert, where adventure meets the arid beauty of the American Southwest. Join us as we explore the rugged landscapes, uncover hidden historical gems, and dive deep into the rich legends and culture of this iconic region. Subscribe now and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out on the latest desert adventures. Please leave a like or comment. This is very helpful. Let's journey together into the heart of the Southwest Desert. Imagine being trapped on a sinking ship off the Mexican coast, your dreams of fortune seemingly drowning with it. Then picture yourself creating an entire city with nothing but sticks, stones, and string, just to avoid paying a ferry toll. Finally, envision building a 1,000-person boomtown where you're not just the mayor, you're the judge, the wedding officiant, and even have the power to declare war. This isn't the plot of a Western novel. This is the true story of Charles Poston, the man who would become known as the Father of Arizona. Welcome to Southwest Desert, where we uncover the most fascinating untold stories of the American Southwest. Today, we're diving into the incredible life of a man whose story reads like a blend of The Count of Monte Cristo and Tombstone, Charles Poston, a Kentucky orphan who would go on to shape the destiny of an entire territory. The year is 1825, and in Hardin County, Kentucky, the same region that produced Abraham Lincoln, a baby boy is born who would one day transform the southwestern frontier. Charles Poston's early life was marked by tragedy when he was orphaned at age 12. But like many great American stories, this one begins with a young man determined to make his mark on the world. He studied law, became a practicing attorney, and even crossed paths with the future President Lincoln. He married and had a daughter, but the call of adventure proved stronger than domestic life. When gold fever struck, he left his family with relatives and headed west. Unlike most fortune seekers, Poston didn't head straight for the gold fields. Instead, he secured a position as chief clerk in the San Francisco Custom House. It was here that fate dealt him an intriguing hand. He began working for the agent of General Agustino de Iturbide's family, who claimed a massive land grant in the newly acquired territory of Arizona. On December 31st, 1853, just one day after the signing of the Gadsden Purchase, Poston embarked on what would become one of the most daring expeditions in southwestern history. Leading a 30-man party that included mining engineers and the brilliant Christian Hermann Ehrenberg, he set sail from San Francisco. But the journey quickly turned into a nightmare. Their ship was blown off course and crashed against the rocks. The crew barely escaped with their lives before watching their vessel sink into the depths. But this was just the beginning of their troubles. They found themselves in a Mexico still bitter about its recent land losses to the United States, requiring delicate negotiations just to continue their journey. Despite these setbacks, the expedition proved fruitful. They located old Mexican silver mines, collected specimens of gold, silver, and copper, and discovered decaying missionary churches. Though they failed to locate the exact boundaries of the Iturbide Grant, these discoveries would prove valuable for future development. When the expedition finally reached the Colorado River, they encountered Louis J.F. Yeager, who operated a ferry service with prices so high they might as well have been highway robbery. Yeager justified his rates by citing the constant risk of Indian attacks. Rather than pay the exorbitant toll, Poston did something extraordinary. He founded a city. Using nothing but sticks, stones, and string, he laid out an entire town plan right there on the spot. Streets, a town square, pier areas, all marked out in the dust. Then, in a stroke of genius, he convinced Yeager himself to buy parcels of this instant city. The plan worked so well that they sold additional lots in California, turning what could have been a costly setback into a profitable venture for the entire expedition. But the story of Colorado City, as it was called, remains disputed to this day. Some claim it became modern-day Yuma, while others insist it was merely a temporary tent town further north. Whatever its ultimate fate, it demonstrated Poston's remarkable ability to turn obstacles into opportunities. In 1856, Poston embarked on his most ambitious venture yet, a 4-month journey covering 762 miles that would lead to the establishment of Tubac. The journey itself was an adventure worthy of a novel. It began in luxury, with French chefs preparing meals at the first military fort, but soon devolved into a grueling trek marked by Apache skirmishes and constant rain. The party stopped in Tucson for 2 weeks, coinciding with the St. Augustine Festival, before pressing on to their final destination. The choice of Tubac wasn't random. Located at the base of the Santa Rita Mountains, the site offered both defensive capabilities and proximity to mining operations, while maintaining a reasonable distance from Apache threats. The settlement began in an abandoned Spanish presidio, but under Poston's leadership it would become something extraordinary. The transformation of Tubac was remarkable. They cleaned the crumbling adobe fort, repaired buildings and corrals, replaced windows and doors, and built furniture from local lumber. They even established vegetable gardens to sustain the community. But it was the discovery of silver that would truly put Tubac on the map. The nearby silver deposits were yielding over $100 daily, and the discovery of the Heinzelman mine in Arivaca promised even greater riches. The settlement attracted skilled Mexican miners, and by Christmas of that same year, the population had swelled to over 1,000 residents. Poston's innovative spirit showed itself in the creation of a unique currency system. Paper money was made redeemable in silver, with each denomination featuring a different animal: a calf for 25 cents, a rooster for 50 cents, a horse for $1, and a lion for $10. Life in Tubac was far from the rough-and-tumble existence you might expect in a frontier mining town. Thanks to the presence of Mexican señoritas and a multicultural population speaking Spanish and various European languages, the settlement developed a surprisingly sophisticated culture. Evenings were filled with music and festivities, and good meals and conversation were the norm. But what made Tubac truly unique was Poston's role. He wasn't just the town's founder, he was its everything. He officiated weddings, granted divorces, had the power to execute criminals, and could even declare war. He was, in every sense, the king of his own small kingdom. However, paradise wouldn't last forever. The settlement faced mounting challenges: Apache conflicts under Cochise, triggered by unfortunate encounters between settlers and the military, a Mexican uprising, and the devastating impact of the Civil War, which recalled the garrison soldiers. The death of Poston's brother John at the Heinzelman mine was a personal tragedy that coincided with the community's decline. Women and children were evacuated to Tucson, and over $1 million in assets were abandoned to the desert. Farms that had been carefully cultivated returned to their natural state. But Poston wasn't finished with Arizona. He turned his attention to a greater goal: creating the Arizona Territory itself. The political process was fraught with challenges, including multiple failed congressional bills and complications from the slavery issue. The territory's distance from the New Mexican territorial government made administration difficult, but the Civil War actually worked in their favor. The Union desperately needed new sources of gold and silver. With General Heinzelman's influence with Lincoln and Poston's first-hand knowledge of the region, the pieces began falling into place. After a crucial meeting with President Lincoln and some persuasive testimony before Congress, success was finally achieved. On February 24, 1863, the Arizona Territory was officially created. Though initially overlooked for territorial positions, Poston was appointed Superintendent of Indian Affairs. He approached the role with characteristic creativity and compassion, traveling with gifts for tribes and bringing along a San Francisco friend to observe the living conditions of the Native Americans. His development plans were ambitious. He proposed a Colorado River reservation system and canal irrigation based on ancient Indian methods. In Congress, he presented over 10 territorial resolutions, and while his Indian programs met with limited success, he did secure some funding for farming equipment. Poston's quest for knowledge and innovation led him on an extraordinary international journey. Commissioned by the Secretary of State to study irrigation and immigration practices, he traveled across Asia, meeting with an impressive array of world leaders: the Emperor of China, the Mikado of Japan, the Viceroy of India, the Khedive of Egypt, the Sultan of Turkey, and the Shah of Persia. But it was his encounter with the Parsis in India and his subsequent interest in Zoroastrianism that would prove both enlightening and costly. His commission was withdrawn due to his increasing focus on religion. Returning to Arizona, Poston took up a position as Register of Land in Florence, working from a small adobe office for a modest salary. During his 4-year tenure, he became fascinated by a pyramid-shaped hill where he discovered ancient stone tower ruins. At his own expense, he built an access road to the site and hosted celebratory events, convinced of connections between this location and Persian culture. The final years of the father of Arizona were marked by decline. He worked as a customs officer at the Mexican border and at a Phoenix agricultural experiment station, living in near poverty and surviving on a $25 monthly pension from the legislature. When he died in June 1902 at age 75, his body was initially unclaimed, a sad commentary on how far the mighty had fallen. But the community, reminded of his contributions through a newspaper appeal, rallied to provide him a fitting memorial. 23 years after his death, a stone pyramid tomb was built on a hill in Florence, where his remains were finally laid to rest. It stands today as a testament to a man who was many things: an adventurer, a city builder, a territorial founder, and a dreamer who saw possibility in the harsh Arizona desert. Charles Poston's story reminds us that the American West wasn't just built by gunfighters and gold miners, but by visionaries who could see cities in the dust and civilization in the wilderness. His life reads like fiction, but every incredible turn was real, shaped by determination, innovation, and an unshakable belief in the potential of the Arizona territory. This has been Southwest Desert. Join us next time as we uncover another remarkable tale from the American Southwest. Until then, remember, sometimes the most extraordinary stories are the ones that history almost forgot. Before Major John Wesley Powell's famous 1869 expedition through the Grand Canyon, two unlikely companions made an extraordinary journey that would remain untold in official history. This is the story of Jim Patton, a Tennessee plantation youth with gold fever, and Juan Vaca, a half-Apache guide whose deep understanding of survival would prove invaluable on their perilous journey through the Colorado River system. Their story begins not with triumph, but with tragedy. In the bitter winter of 1859, Patton's gold expedition faced disaster high above the timberline. An avalanche claimed 2 of their party, leaving 8 survivors to face what came next. Fate wasn't finished with them. A late-night Indian raid, motivated by the desire for horses and guns, left only Patton and Vodka alive, forcing them to flee on foot down the San Miguel River with barely more than the clothes on their backs. Found and sheltered by a small Apache sub-tribe near the junction of the San Miguel and Dolores Rivers, the 2 men faced a crucial decision. The Santa Fe Trail was ruled out due to hostile tribes, and a direct Arizona crossing seemed impossible given the harsh desert conditions. It was Vaca's knowledge of water-following strategies that led them to consider what seemed impossible, riding logs down the river system itself. The training began immediately. Vaca, drawing on his expertise as a log rider, taught Patton the intricate techniques needed for survival. Their chosen vessels were simple: 15-foot logs, 8 inches in diameter, salvaged from riverside driftwood. Patton learned to shift between sitting positions for calm waters and lying chest down for treacherous currents, mastering the subtle leg and arm movements needed for steering. But physical challenges emerged immediately. Despite systematic attempts to adapt to the cold water, Patton struggled to match the incredible cold resistance of his Apache companion. Vaca, like many Apache children, had been trained from infancy to endure extreme conditions, a stark contrast to Patton's plantation upbringing. Their survival depended on Vaca's extensive knowledge of native foods. They feasted on leaf-wrapped trout cooked in hot coals, gathered wild berries and piñon nuts, and hunted everything from deer to rattlesnakes. Vaca's expertise with mushrooms proved crucial, though Patton's inexperience nearly proved fatal when he mistook a poisonous variety for an edible one. The journey was marked by near-death experiences that tested both men's resolve. In a side canyon, Patton faced a rattlesnake that struck his moccasin, its fangs catching in the sole, a miracle of survival attributed to divine intervention. Later, a treacherous soapstone slide in Upper Marble Canyon sent Patton plunging 50 feet into the river, resulting in the loss of crucial supplies including their spare hatchet, knife, and bow. Perhaps their most harrowing moment came during an encounter with a massive whirlpool. Vaca, despite his expertise, found himself trapped in its swirling depths. Patton made multiple desperate attempts to rescue his companion, finally succeeding but forever changing their dynamic. The incident shook Vaca's confidence and led to a more cautious approach to river navigation. The canyon itself seemed to test their resolve with unprecedented challenges. A massive thunderstorm trapped them under a ledge, its fury so intense it displaced massive rocks and triggered a spiritual crisis in Vaca, challenging his beliefs about evil spirits. As they ventured deeper into the canyon, food became increasingly scarce. The barren landscape forced them to survive on rock lizards, the occasional coyote, and whatever meager vegetation they could find. But it was overconfidence that finally claimed Jim Patton's life. Distracted by the stunning scenery, he misread a rapid's characteristics with fatal consequences. His body was later discovered near the Gila River mouth, where Vaca performed a solemn burial ceremony, constructing a rock mound and offering a final prayer that bridged their different spiritual traditions. Though Patton's journey ended in tragedy, his achievement as the first documented white man through the Grand Canyon system deserves recognition. The story, preserved through Juan Vaca's oral tradition, offers a remarkable glimpse into a journey that predated Powell's famous expedition by 9 years. Vaca, who later became a respected missionary to both Indians and settlers, ensured this extraordinary tale of survival, friendship, and tragedy would not be lost to history. While Major Powell's 1869 expedition rightfully holds its place in official records, the story of Patton and Vaca reminds us that history's first pioneers don't always make it into the history books. Their journey, marked by both triumph and tragedy, speaks to the indomitable human spirit and the power of cross-cultural cooperation in the face of nature's greatest challenges. The skills and knowledge that Vaca possessed, from log riding techniques to survival strategies passed down through generations of Apache tradition, proved invaluable throughout their journey. His understanding of native foods, weather patterns, and river navigation techniques kept them alive through countless challenges. Meanwhile, Patton's determination to adapt and learn from his companion demonstrates the remarkable capacity for human adaptation. Their story also highlights the often overlooked fact that the Grand Canyon had been known and utilized by Native American tribes, particularly the Apache, long before European exploration. Vaca's accounts of Apache tribes using the canyon as a refuge suggest that their journey, while groundbreaking for white settlers, followed in the footsteps of indigenous pathfinders who had navigated these waters for generations. The environmental challenges they faced were extraordinary. From the bitter cold of mountain snowstorms to the scorching heat of lower canyon reaches, they endured extreme temperature fluctuations while constantly battling the river's treacherous currents. Their food sources evolved as they descended, forcing them to adapt to increasingly sparse resources in the canyon's more barren sections. Their method of transportation, riding logs rather than attempting to build boats, speaks to both the ingenuity of indigenous river navigation techniques and the practical limitations they faced. Without tools or time to construct proper boats, they relied on Vaca's expertise in traditional log riding methods, a skill that would prove both effective and ultimately fatal for Patton. The spiritual aspects of their journey add another layer to this remarkable tale. Vaca's deep connection to both his Apache heritage and his Christian faith was tested during their most challenging moments, particularly during the massive thunderstorm that seemed to shake the very foundations of the canyon. Meanwhile, Patton's survival of the rattlesnake incident left him convinced of divine intervention in their journey. The legacy of their journey extends beyond the mere fact of being first. Their story demonstrates the vital importance of indigenous knowledge in early exploration, the power of cross-cultural cooperation, and the harsh realities of frontier survival. Vaca's later role as a missionary helped bridge cultural gaps between settlers and native populations, while his preservation of their story adds a crucial chapter to our understanding of early canyon exploration. As we reflect on this remarkable journey, we're reminded that history is often more complex and nuanced than official records suggest. The story of Patton and Vodka, preserved through oral tradition and later historical documentation, stands as a testament to the extraordinary capabilities of human beings when faced with seemingly impossible challenges. Their journey, predating Powell's famous expedition, reminds us that great achievements don't always make it into the history books, but their impact resonates through time nonetheless. The American Southwest of the 1820s was a land of stark contrasts and shifting loyalties. Spanish colonial rule was crumbling, Mexican independence was on the horizon, and the ambitious American Republic cast covetous eyes toward the territory. In this crucible of change, in the sun-baked streets of Santa Fe, a city whose very name, Holy Faith, seemed at odds with its frontier reputation, a teenage girl arrived who would transform the city's destiny. Known to history as Doña Tula, she would become one of the most enigmatic figures of the American Southwest, a gambling queen, double agent, and power broker whose true identity remains shrouded in mystery to this day. Her origins were as mysterious as her later life. Some claimed she was the daughter of a Spanish aristocrat who fled to the New World after murdering her lover in a passion-fueled scandal that rocked Madrid society. Others believed her tale of being born to a soldier and an Indian woman from Taos Pueblo, a heritage that would have given her unique insight into the territory's various cultures. She first introduced herself as Gertrudes Barceló, though many suspected this was an alias, the first of many masks she would wear throughout her remarkable life. In this period of tremendous change, she found her way into the gambling world through a man known only as Gonçalves, who owned a gambling hall on Calle de la Muralla. The circumstances of their meeting remain unclear, But what is known is that Gonsalves saw something in the young woman, perhaps a ruthless intelligence that matched his own, and took her under his wing. Under his tutelage, she learned not just the intricacies of cards and dice, but the subtle arts of reading people, managing a business in a frontier town, and most importantly, keeping secrets. The gambling halls of 1820 Santa Fe were more than mere houses of chance. They were informal banks, political salons, and intelligence-gathering operations all rolled into one. Gonsalves taught his protégé how to manage not just games of chance, but the complex web of favors, debts, and secrets that really kept such establishments profitable. He showed her how to spot a cheater, how to handle a drunk aristocrat without causing offense, and how to remember every whispered confession uttered over the gaming tables. Then, in a twist worthy of the best gambling stories, Gonsalves vanished. Some said he returned to Mexico City to claim an inheritance. Others whispered darker theories, that he had crossed the wrong person, or that his young protégé had orchestrated his departure. But what's certain is that he left his gambling hall to his young protégé, who quickly rebranded it as Las Tulas and herself as Doña Tula. For a woman, especially one so young, to run a gambling establishment in a Mexican garrison town was unprecedented, but Doña Tula was just getting started. Within 5 years, Las Tulas was transformed. Gone were the rough wooden tables and simple furnishings. In their place appeared magnificent pier glass mirrors, deep-napped carpets, and crystal chandeliers, all imported at great expense from Mexico City. The original building expanded as she bought adjacent properties, knocking through walls to create an elegant warren of gaming rooms and private dining areas. Each room was designed to serve a specific purpose, from the public salon where military officers could be seen making appropriate social calls, to the private chambers where high-stakes games and secret negotiations took place. The clientele changed, too. Where once common soldiers had gathered, drinking rough mezcal and wagering their modest pay, now only high-ranking officers, wealthy merchants, and the elite of Santa Fe society were welcome. The transformation was calculated and complete, from the Swiss crystal glasses that replaced crude pottery to the elaborate dress code that excluded all but the most prosperous patrons. Even the gaming itself evolved, with European-style card games and sophisticated betting systems replacing simpler games of chance. Las Tulas became famous for serving the finest cuisine outside Mexico City, with service provided by what contemporary accounts described as the most alluring women in the territory. But these weren't mere entertainers. They were carefully selected and trained to be excellent conversationalists, able to discuss politics and literature with educated patrons while keeping their ears open for valuable information. Perhaps the most significant relationship in Doña Tula's rise to power was with Governor Manuel Armijo. Their connection was immediate and intense, two ruthless personalities recognizing something of themselves in each other. Armijo, known for his iron grip on the territory and his strategic political maneuvering, saw in Doña Tula a kindred spirit who understood power's true nature. Within a week of meeting, she had her own private quarters in the governmental palace, a move that sparked countless whispered conversations in Santa Fe's drawing rooms and marketplaces. But those who dismissed her as merely the governor's latest paramour severely underestimated both parties. This wasn't just a romantic liaison. It was a powerful business and political alliance that would reshape Santa Fe's power structure. State affairs were now conducted at Las Tulas, with visiting dignitaries entertained there at the government's expense. Money flowed freely from the Mexico City treasury through the palace to Las Tulas, with Governor Armijo presumably taking his cut along the way. The arrangement suited both parties perfectly. Armijo gained a sophisticated base of operations away from official scrutiny, while Doña Tula's establishment gained an air of legitimacy that set it apart from common gambling houses. By 1844, the political winds were shifting. American expansion was pushing westward, and tensions between Mexico and the United States were rising. It was in this climate that two Americans appeared at Las Tula one quiet afternoon, claiming to represent the Great Western Trading Company. Despite her poor English and pronounced Castilian lisp, Doña Tula understood perfectly well what they were really after: military intelligence. This marked the beginning of her career as a double agent. The Americans paid her 500 pesos for information about troop numbers and locations, with 3 more payments following. She played a dangerous game, carefully balancing her relationships with Mexican authorities and American agents, providing each side with just enough information to maintain their trust while never fully committing to either cause. But the stakes would soon become much higher. In 1846, as war between the United States and Mexico loomed, she met with James Magoffin and Captain Philip St. George Cook. Their proposition was audacious: $50,000, half up front and half after the city's capture, if she could influence Governor Armijo to surrender Santa Fe without a fight. The sum was enormous for the time, equivalent to millions in today's money, but the real prize was the guarantee of continued influence under American rule. History records that Santa Fe indeed fell to American forces without bloodshed, though whether this was due to Doña Tula's influence remains debated by historians. What is certain is that she managed to maintain her position of power through the transition, something few members of the old Mexican elite managed to accomplish. The winter of 1846 brought more than just cold winds to Santa Fe. The city simmered with resentment under American occupation, as proud Spanish and Mexican families chafed under new rulers who often viewed them with suspicion and contempt. It was in this atmosphere of tension and wounded pride that perhaps Doña Tula's most dramatic moment arrived on Christmas Eve. That night she learned of a planned revolt against the American occupation. The conspirators, led by Colonel Don Diego Archuleta and Reverend Juan Felipe Ortiz, had planned every detail with military precision. At 11 p.m., church bells would signal the uprising, artillery in the plaza would be spiked, and key American leaders, including Governor Charles Bent and Colonel Sterling Price, would be eliminated. The plan had been months in the making, drawing support from both the old military establishment and the Catholic Church. But Doña Tula noticed something amiss: fewer officers than usual in her establishment that evening, a sign that the American military already knew about the plot. With characteristic decisiveness, she quickly summoned Don Diego and Tomas Ortiz, providing them with escape horses and crucial minutes of advance warning. When Father Juan rang the church bells that night, he was met only with the laughter of American soldiers. The revolt was over before it began, and that night, occupation troops celebrated at Las Tulas, drinking toasts in the same rooms where the revolt had been planned. Under American rule, her business actually prospered further. Competitor casinos were closed, while Las Tulas enjoyed special protection from the authorities. But success came with its own challenges. The arrival of American military families brought new social complications. Military wives objected to her presence at social events, even as her attendance became mandatory due to her position in society. She was caught between two worlds, too powerful to be ignored, too controversial to be fully accepted. The end came suddenly, either in 1851 or 1869. Historical records disagree on the date. She died in her home near Las Tulas, with some suggesting murder, though nothing was ever proven. The military's response was telling. Soldiers immediately secured the premises and conducted a thorough search, completely dismantling the interior. They tore up floorboards, broke through walls, and even excavated the cellar, searching for what some believed to be hidden documents that could compromise prominent figures on both sides of the border. The search's intensity suggested that even in death, Doña Tula's power to reveal secrets made her a threat to the established order. Whether she was truly a Spanish aristocrat, a soldier's daughter, or something else entirely, Doña Tula left an indelible mark on Santa Fe during one of its most turbulent periods. Her story reminds us that often the most fascinating historical figures are those who remain just out of reach, their true nature as elusive as a winning hand in a high-stakes game of chance. In the end, perhaps the greatest testament to her influence is not what we know about Doña Tula, but what remains hidden, the secrets that died with her, the documents that may still lie buried somewhere in Santa Fe's soil, and the true story of a woman who managed to hold power in an era when few women could even dream of such influence. I hope you enjoyed this Southwest historical tale. It's 1819, and the scorching Arizona sun beats down on an extraordinary scene unfolding at the Tucson Presidio. Chief Chilitapaj, leading 236 Apaches, approaches the Spanish fortress, not with weapons drawn but with hands extended in peace. Within weeks, the scene would repeat itself as 10 additional Apache chiefs and their bands arrived, seeking reconciliation with their former enemies. This remarkable moment wasn't just a diplomatic breakthrough, it was the culmination of decades of transformation in Spanish Arizona. How did a region once defined by brutal warfare between Spanish settlers and Apache raiders become a place where former enemies could break bread together? Today, we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating yet overlooked periods of American Southwest history, the final years of Spanish Arizona, a story of conflict, innovation, and an unlikely peace. To understand this transformation, we need to travel back to 1691, when a determined Jesuit missionary named Father Eusebio Kino first arrived in this unforgiving landscape. Kino's mission was clear: bring Christianity to the indigenous peoples of the region. But success proved elusive. While the Pima and Sobai Puri Native Americans showed some receptiveness to his message, most native peoples maintained their traditional ways, resistant to Spanish influence. This tension eventually erupted in the Pima Rebellion, a watershed moment that forced Spanish authorities to establish the Tubac Presidio in 1752. This military outpost would become the first in a network of fortifications designed to protect Spanish interests in the region. But protection was sorely needed. The situation was far more dire than many in Madrid realized. The Apache raids were relentless and strategically coordinated. Some Apaches dominated the San Pedro River corridor, while Chiricahua and Pinal Gila Apaches terrorized settlers throughout both the San Pedro and Santa Cruz valleys. By the 1770s, Spanish forces found themselves pushed into a defensive position, struggling to maintain even basic control of their northern frontier. Enter King Carlos III of Spain, whose 1772 regulations would reshape the entire region. These weren't minor adjustments. They represented a complete overhaul of Spain's frontier policy. Based on the comprehensive 1768 report by the Marquis de Ruby, the new regulations called for a strategic cordon of presidios along the frontier. But perhaps most significantly, they marked a dramatic shift in Spanish Indian policy, transferring control from the church to the military and establishing a controversial policy of Indian extermination. The implementation was swift and decisive. The Tubac garrison relocated to Tucson in 1776, establishing the new Presidio of San Agustin del Tucson. Two other garrisons briefly moved north but returned south by 1780, creating a more concentrated defensive line. But the story takes a fascinating turn with the arrival of an exceptional commander, Captain Pedro Allende y Saavedra. Allende y Saavedra wasn't your typical frontier officer. A Spanish nobleman with 22 years of military experience, he commanded 77 well-trained men by 1778. His campaigns would become legendary among both Spanish settlers and native peoples. His May 1778 expedition north demonstrated Spanish reach, while his November 1779 defense against 350 Apaches showed Spanish resilience. Between 1783 and 1784, he led multiple campaigns to the Gila River, and his expeditions toward the Solomonville area proved that Spanish forces could project power deep into Apache territory. The Spanish military of this era was a fascinating blend of old-world military tradition and frontier adaptation. Each soldier carried an impressive arsenal: a lance for charging, a short sword for close combat, 2 pistols for immediate defense, and a carbine for distance engagement. They wore distinctive 6-ply leather jackets called cueras, which could stop arrows but proved challenging in the Arizona heat. Their leather shields completed a defensive ensemble that was effective against masked enemies but less suited for the hit-and-run tactics favored by Apache warriors. Their tactics were equally distinctive. Spanish forces excelled at set-piece battles, but struggled against the more mobile Apache raiders. In a practice that spoke to the brutality of frontier warfare, they would mount the heads of their enemies on lances as a warning, a grim reminder of the cost of resistance. But in 1786, everything changed with Bernardo de Galvez's revolutionary peace policy. Rather than continuing the cycle of violence, Galvez proposed something radical: establish peace settlements, establecimientos de paz, near the presidios. The policy was comprehensive and carefully considered. It included regular food and supply distributions, agricultural training, and even the controlled provision of liquor and old firearms to Apache groups who joined the settlements. This wasn't a small investment. The Spanish crown set aside 7,000 pesos for Sonoran settlements alone, with plans to feed up to 6,000 Indians. Multiple locations were selected for these settlements, creating a network of peaceful interaction between formerly hostile peoples. The results were remarkable. By 1793, the first Apache rancheria was established at Tucson. By the late 1790s, 18 Apache families had made Tucson their permanent home, with the Spanish government spending 1,600 pesos annually on their support. Another 40 Apache families settled at Bacuachi, creating a second successful peace settlement. This period of peace allowed for unprecedented development in the region. Religious architecture flourished, beginning with the construction of San Xavier del Bac in 1783. The Tumac mission followed in 1802, and the San Agustin del Tucson Convento was built between 1797 and 1810. These weren't just places of worship, they were symbols of the new stability. The economic transformation was equally impressive. Ranching expanded dramatically. By 1804, Tucson alone boasted 4,000 cattle, 2,600 sheep, and 1,200 horses. Major land grants reshaped the landscape. Rancho de Buenavista, La Canoa, San Jose de Sonoita, and the massive San Bernardino grant, which supported an incredible 100,000 cattle. Agriculture diversified beyond traditional crops. While wheat, corn, beans, peas, and lentils remained staples, cotton production began to take root. Lime mining north of Tucson provided materials for construction, while mining operations near Arivaca and the Salero mine in the Santa Rita Mountains began extracting precious metals by 1821. This period of peace and prosperity wasn't achieved through military might alone. Captain José de Zúñiga's 1794 campaigns and the 1795 expedition attempting to open a Santa Fe trade route showed that Spanish authorities were thinking beyond mere security. They were building a sustainable future for the region. But as with all golden ages, this one too had to end. The transition to Mexican rule in 1821 marked the beginning of a slow decline. While Spanish captains remained in service and José Romero continued as Tucson's commander, the foundation of peace began to crack. The carefully maintained balance would hold until 1831, but various factors were already working against it. The reasons for the breakdown were complex. Political turmoil in Europe distracted Spanish authorities. Mexican independence brought new priorities and new challenges. The Mexican government lacked both the funds and the interest to maintain the expensive peace policy. The conversion of Apache peoples to a sedentary lifestyle proved incomplete, and Spanish military strength remained limited. Perhaps most importantly, the Apache people's fundamental resistance to abandoning their traditional way of life created an underlying tension that no amount of food or supplies could fully resolve. What makes this period so fascinating is not just the achievement of peace between former enemies, but what it tells us about the possibility of transformation. For 35 years, Spanish settlers and Apache peoples found a way to coexist, even if imperfectly. It's a chapter of history that reminds us how policy, persistence, and pragmatism can sometimes achieve what weapons and warfare cannot. As we look back at that sun-baked presidio where Chief Chiltepaj and his people sought peace in 1819, we're reminded that history is rarely as simple as we imagine. The story of Spanish Arizona's final years is one of complexity, adaptation, and the eternal human struggle between conflict and cooperation. It's a testament to the possibility of peace, even in the most unlikely circumstances, and a reminder that sometimes the boldest policy changes can yield the most remarkable results. I hope you enjoyed this Southwest story. Check out my large catalog of videos and playlists. Happy trails!